A couple of stories making the rounds this morning. The number one biggest story in the land is that of the budget. And President Tinubu, I think, he's deemed it, tagged it, the budget of restoration yesterday. He presented his budget, and afterwards he came to Lagos for his Christmas and New Year celebration. Yesterday he said a lot of things, and I'm just going to begin with a quick budget breakdown where he said the budget is going to bring about a lot of hope. It's going to continue the line of renewed hope initiative. And he was talking about the fact that the budget is going to reduce inflation from about 34.6% to about 15%. The question is how? And I ask how deliberately because all the inflation targets we had for this year has been nullified, because at some point, based on the projection, inflation should be about 26%. At some point, they said inflation media was going to be plateauing, and at that point, there was going to be a deceleration. But today, it has heightened up to 34.6%, and we've not been able to fight inflation. So if he says that this budget is going to bring down inflation to about 15%, how? And I also saw another very stark numbers when the Senate President was speaking. He talks about the fact that they've extended the 2024 budget to be able to run into 2025 because the budget performance, I think, for infrastructure was about 50% and recurrent expenditure 48%. That's very paltry. So that means they didn't meet a lot of the revenue targets to be able to deploy, to the budget. And for the third quarter, we only met about 75% of our revenue targets. And you start to ask at a time where we are saying that, our expenditure is about 34 trillion and our revenue target is about 34 trillion, our expenditure is about 47.8 trillion. How are we going to meet our revenue targets? Yes, probably they have touted this new tax bill as a game changer, but how is it going to kick in quickly, to be able to meet these revenue targets? We are incurring a deficit of 13.8 trillion. We're going to spend over 15 trillion for debt servicing. At a time like this, one is taking a back and looking at, what are the potentials of this budget? The breakdown, the first thing gets the large chunk, 4.91 trillion. Health is about 2.7 trillion. Education too also comes in the numbers. So, and the infrastructure, I think you just have that a little bit over 4 trillion. So we're looking, how are we going to be able to get that much needed productivity in? The president talked about spending, I think, over 30 billion thus far to be able to give over 300,000 people, this student loan scheme, and the potentials of also how people are going to pay back in the long run of all of that has always constantly been a challenge. People from the Southeast said they didn't really get a lot of the push they needed to get from this scheme, and that is also there. So conversations around workability of most of these plans, and it's just a matter of time we'll be able to see how all of this pans out. So debt servicing is going up in over 15 trillion, infrastructure is getting 4.06 trillion, health is getting 2.48 trillion, education is 3.5 trillion. So there are just many questions. Number one question is, if our budget performance is about 50% thus far for this year, next year, the LCC and a couple of other companies are already complaining about business headwinds that are coming, based on the state of inflation, state of play of the economy. How are we going to try to be able to create these buffers to meet our revenue target? That's number one. And the budget benchmark is another one. 1,500. Are we going to be able to hit that amount? 2.06 million barrels per day. Only time is going to be able to tell on that. And the other project he says he's talking about, he says in 2025, there's provision for 826 billion for infrastructure development in the educational sector. The provision includes all of those for universal basic education and 9 higher institutions. It's also convinced that the universal health coverage will strengthen primary healthcare across this country. So they have 402 billion for infrastructure in the healthcare sector. Another 282 billion for basic healthcare fund. Hospitals will be revitalized, drugs will be brought in. Number one question is, how are we going to meet an appropriate budget performance? That's just it. Secondly, the economic headwinds. Are we hedging against that? That's another factor there. I also want to talk about another story making the rounds, which is about the stampede in Oyo State. They said it was a program organized for young people, and in Oyo State by a radio station and a couple of other partners. Number one question is, what were the appropriate measures, security measures, put in place for that program? So for events like that have a lot of people coming in, what are the measures put in place to avoid a stampede? I hear a lot of parents are going around to different hospitals. We just pray that those children definitely get some healing, and some might have passed. But how are we going to secure and ensure that we shun things like that the next time? And these are very important questions we should be able to ask ourselves. But it's another tragedy that has happened in Oyo State, and it must never happen again. Okay, in fact, I have an official statement by the radio station Agidigbo 88.7 saying official statement released by the management of Agidigbo following the incident at Islamic High School in Basharon. This to inform general public that they've received the news of the tragedy at Agidigbo, that they rather the fun fair events at Basharon High School organized by Wings Foundation with a great shock. There's news making around that Agidigbo is the organizer of the children. However, the management wishes to state that Agidigbo is not the organizer of the event, but one of the media outfits used to promote the event. Upon receiving the notice, the mammoth crowd at 5 a.m. at the venue at Agidigbo FM uses this medium to sensitize all populace that jingles and service and announcements from time to time should stop going to the venue of the fun fair. The organizers of the event did all they can to ensure the tragedy was curtailed by deploying security apparatus and media officials and other relevant agencies to come to the aid of those affected by the tragedy. This is a sad day for us all. However, we call on general public to shroud the spirit of fake news and contact Agidigbo for more information. This is not the time to spread misinformation. Agidigbo implores the general public to continue to pray for the speedy recovery of those in the hospital. As said by Olayinka Abdul Wahab, Director of Programs of Agidigbo, because the story was also going out that Agidigbo was one of the organizers of that event.